Welcome to the Lightbody Brief. I'm Sean Lightbody, the founder of Lightbody Designs, and on this podcast, I'm speaking with someone who's built a real business by solving specific problems and making data-driven decisions, especially in the world of SEO and digital strategy. Today, I'm joined by Steven Schneider, the founder and CEO of TrioSEO. His agency helps businesses drive real growth with organic search, no ads, no gimmicks, just consistent execution. Steven has created a 7-figure SEO agency with over 40 blogs and 400 articles a month. And today, we'll talk about what the journey looked like, what he's learned, and what advice he has for others getting started. Steven, thanks for taking the time to be here.
Of course, John. Happy to be here.
So I would love to start with the present. Where's Steven now? What's the day-to-day life in the SEO space? Where are you spending most of your time at?
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit. I think early on when I started dabbling in SEO, it was really easy to achieve top rankings and get a lot of traffic on your site. And nowadays it's much more built-in authority and trying to show Google that you have a legit brand and can actually speak with expertise and trust and all of the things that really contribute toward a high quality company at the end of the day. And Google's smart enough to catch on between all of the AI stuff that's going on. So the massive shift is just trying to ensure that your site is really high quality, the content is high quality, you have a lot of trust built into your brand, and that you actually display that from start to finish.
What would you say makes up high quality content? Because there's a lot of AI checkers out there that try to humanize content nowadays. So how can you tell this AI humanized content from human written content, and where's the quality found?
The main thing is just conversationally from what we've seen. And usually we're talking about SEO. You and I are somewhat talking about SEO or entrepreneurship in this kind of conversation, but you don't hear us repeating it over and over again in order to build awareness. It's not like in order to drive SEO growth, it's really important that you focus on SEO keywords and like you can start hearing these terms pop up over and over again. And that's kind of a red flag right there. There's also a lot of general words or abbreviations or grammar dialect that AI uses. And so we're a 100% human written agency. And so we're trained to spot those things. And even though there are humanizers out there, they're not quite there yet. So you can spot some differences. And I think the biggest thing is just making sure that your content reads like it was written by a human. There should be punchy undertones and analogies and things that make sense from someone who's reading a good, well-written article, and not just trying to create content for the sake of creating content.
I feel like it's still hard to understand where that comes from, because can't you tell AI to write as, this is something I've done for a couple of my reports where I tell AI to use the vocabulary of a third grader, have these mistakes that humans make and humanize it more. And I just don't know, because you're able to do all these keywords and say add related words in this area. And do you think that really, how much difference do you think there is there?
Well, I think when you're trying to create a prompt in AI to achieve an outcome that could just be written naturally, there's always going to be a disconnect between how someone can add their personality to a piece of content and the fact that AI has no personality. And so there's a lot of my friends who are in the LinkedIn space and their sole job is to write content, whether that's journalistic pieces or high-end brands, whatever that might look like. And a lot of the readership will attach to these people because they know that they have this very specific tone and personality that shines through in their content. And so over time, as brands develop a sense of tone and messaging within their own brand, it's really important to stick within that, because that is what people come to recognize and they become familiar with. And that's what overall kind of increases the brand loyalty and the brand trust at the end of the day. And so if you go from article A to article B, and on the front end, they say that they're written by the same person, who knows what really is going on. But if the article is completely different, when you read it and you're like, well, this doesn't feel like it was written by the same person, that really can distort the trust from the person who reads it and wants to become ingrained with that brand. And so I think at the end of the day, you just really have to remember that there are real people reading the content on the other side of it. And sure, you can cut corners and save time by trying to use AI, but at the end of the day, at what cost? Does it really help you create $1 million business, or are you happy with a subpar business? Are you going down the path of least resistance, or are you trying to take the path that is really hard and comes with a lot of uphill battles because you know that at the end of the day it's worth it? So I think AI is a tool, and it's a really efficient tool, don't get me wrong, but I think that there's, in our industry at least, when you become too reliant on it, it really exposes a lot of risk and can jeopardize the brand.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It takes the person on the other side fully comprehending it, not just Google being like, has all these words, but it has to be smooth for the user.
Exactly.
To understand too. And you've built some pretty remarkable businesses. What are you most proud of for your work, if you had to pick one now?
I just had so much fun building my first company, and don't get me wrong, like this one that we're building now is a blast, but it was just so fresh and so new. I built that in college through the Entrepreneurship program and scaled that up out of college. My entire goal while building that business was to not get a real job, quote unquote. Anything I could do to not go and apply to a corporate job was my entire model. If I was making enough money to cover my rent and my groceries and have a little bit of extra fun money, that was it. I was crushing it. And I think just being in that era of being so young and hungry and working, I would wake up at 3 a.m. to work on my sites before going to class. And then I would sit in the back of class and work all through class and scrape by and get out of school to do the same thing. And it was just so energizing. And it felt like that honeymoon era. And I think that to be back in that success that we had, and it was such a fast, very lucky path, fast-paced growth. It was great. It was just a crazy high. I loved it.
How much time were you spending each day, would you say, while you were in college?
Probably more than I should have, but it worked out okay. Probably anywhere from, 6 to 10 hours a day. Easy. Weekends included too. Weekends were just all day. I couldn't get enough. I was literally addicted to the potential upside that it brought. Once I learned the business model and learned how much money you could make and just what it had to offer, I pretty much threw all studies to the wayside. I was a 3.9 student, and I dropped down to B's and C's, get degrees mentality, and just heads down, just was like, how do I build this business as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I've really been feeling that too, going through this class. Arthur had us do the math just the other day, actually, where it's like calculate what your scaled up end of the year project would be. And it's just like, looking, if you're making $2,000 a month from clients, and say you have like 20 clients, you're making almost $500,000 a year just like that. And that really puts it in perspective. If you can just get grinding and get to that point, you're pretty well set right there with the amount of costs you're having to cover. If you're doing this by yourself or just a 1 or 2 man team, you're just making a lot, and it's really inspiring.
I remember being in your position, and I was so money hungry right out the gate. That's like all I want to do is I want to make as much money as possible. And then I started making money, and the game changed, because I think it's really easy for people who, like, I remember thinking back, like, when I was college and everyone's like, oh, it's not about the money. And I'm like, it's really easy for you to say because I don't have any money. So it's like, all I want is that. And then you make money and you're like, oh, damn, what's next? And so I remember I was talking to my business partner back then in college, and he's my mentor and best friend. And we were talking one day about what do we want as the ideal outcome for the business. And at that point, I think we were making, the company, and not each of us were making, but the company was making around $50K a month. And it was super healthy.
And this was your first company?
First company. And we were like, what's our ideal outcome for this? And how far do we want to go? And we were talking about, I said, I'd love to live on the lake, and I'd love to have all these assets and be able to travel. And like pretty much the most materialistic answer I could think of. And to my surprise, he's like, I just want to wake up every day happy to work on the business. And I was like, damn, that's such a good answer. When you realize that all you have to do is wake up every day and not work, I don't look at what I do as work. Even though days suck and business is just so hard at the end of the day. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's not a job. I've had a job, and I worked at a startup for 6 months, and I quit because I didn't have the drive. And I was just like, I will figure anything out before I do this one more day. And that was work. That was a job. And so if you're going down this path, think about it from like, how do I just wake up every day happy to not go get a real job? And if you can do that, the money will follow regardless, but that's the core of what I've realized is that's how you're winning at the end of the day.
That sounds like exactly what you want in life, but how do you keep SEO interesting at this stage of your life? Because you've been doing this for years now. You've got to have this pattern down, right?
I wish. It'd make my life a lot easier. No, there's always things that creep up. We have a team of 15 people. We have almost 30 clients right now. We have 5 departments. There's always a game to tackle. There's always problems. There's always puzzles to figure out. My core pillars that I focus on are sales, marketing, get more business, close more clients, grow the company. It's like a pretty straightforward recipe from that angle. So sales is something I never really had to do in my first business. And so now that I am in this position, sales is a priority, and I have to learn how to sell SEO, how to understand psychology of the people who are giving us money, what's important to them, how do I understand and explain to them the ideal outcome and what they're going to get at this at the end of the day. And then also keeping expectations realistic, because SEO isn't a guaranteed game. It's based on guesses and gut feelings, and you can't really sell high ticket service based on gut feelings. So you have to be able to explain that and tread gently, and it's a whole different can of worms. So there's always something fun to work on at the end of the day.
Do you ever find it struggling to explain how SEO benefits a business to a business owner who doesn't know really anything about SEO or outcomes really?
Most of the people that we try and work with, we're happy saying no to someone if they want to work with us and for whatever reason they're not a good fit or they're not our ideal customer. That was something that was really hard to learn, because if somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, I don't know what SEO is and I'm taking a stab at this hoping that you can make my business this next $1 million thing because of your service, that's a red flag for us. I can't do that, and you're going to have unrealistic expectations of our service. And if they don't align with whatever perceived values and outcomes you think you have, you're going to be pissed at us, you're going to cancel, and you're going to leave us a bad review. So we'd rather work with somebody who understands what SEO is, they understand the value, they understand the long-term play of it, but they would rather hire a professional to do it. And so part of that process is figuring out who is your ideal customer, what you were saying, trying to figure out where do you niche down, and how do you speak to the people that are really easy to work with and not just say yes to any person that comes on your plate. And that will save you a bunch of headaches down the road.
Is there anything else besides not really knowing SEO that would make someone a bad choice as a client?
Oh, tons. So I literally have an entire document for our sales team of reasons to say no. For example, if SEO is the only marketing channel they have, if they're too reliant on SEO, that's a red flag. If they have a low budget but high expectations, like this disconnect there is never going to work. Short timeline, so if they want results in 60 days or 90 days even, that's a red flag. Even if they think long term, if the expected outcome of what they expected in long term, so say, hey, I'm fine working with you guys for a year, but at the end of the year I want 500 leads a month, that's not going to work out. People who are way too controlling over the situation. If my job is to create content for you and you won't approve the content, that's not going to work. So there's a whole checklist of why it won't work. And also at the end of the day, if people are assholes, don't work with them. It's just very simple psychology. If they're not going to be someone you want to talk to, be someone you want to engage with, cut all ties and just move on.
Make it easier for yourself, right?
Exactly.
Don't put yourself in a tough area.
Right.
So how did you first get into SEO? You were in college. What sparked you into it?
So I was actually in the entrepreneurship program, and my business partner and friend at the time, he had already been building these websites, and one of the slides that we had to present on in entrepreneurship, we had to put 2 or 3 bullet points about ourselves on it. And he put one of the bullet points was business owner. And I was like, right, what are you doing? You're like selling t-shirts on the side or something? And he's like, no, I build websites and I use SEO to drive people to Amazon, and then I sell products and get a commission based on their affiliate program. And so I was like, oh, well, how does it even work? What are you talking about? So pretty much that was the name of the game, where you would target an article, best fishing poles of 2025, and you'd write an article around the top 5 products, drive traffic to it, and then direct people to Amazon. And then Amazon gives you a commission if you sell that product. And regardless if you sell that product or not, you could also make a commission on anything else the person buys in 24 hours irrespective if that product was actually sold or not. So like, say that you directed someone there for fishing poles, they didn't buy the fishing poles, but they bought a jacket, you'd still get a commission on the jacket. So anything within 24 hours they buy, even if it's not the original product, you make money on. So like
through your Amazon link? Huh.
So just because you sent someone there within 24 hours, whatever they buy, you get a commission on. So the numbers game of that playbook was insane because it's Amazon. People will buy random stuff and not even think about the fact that they went to your site, clicked on it, came back later that night and bought a gift for their mom. You get a gift, you get that commission. So I was just obsessed with that because these sites that we were building they'd make anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a month. Massive sites, 1% sites that we owned were making $20,000, $50,000 a month by themselves. And you could sell it like real estate. So if a site is making $1,000 per month, you can flip it and sell it for 30 times whatever the profit is of that site. And since there's no expenses on the site, you could pretty much have a zero expense P&L and then sell it for a 30 times multiplier of whatever the revenue is. So if it's $1,000 a month, that site is now valued at $30,000. So you could build a site to $1,000 a month, put some content on it, flip it for 30K, take 30K, buy another site, do the same thing, flip them. And so that's kind of where we started building and buying tons of websites because you have enough websites, they pop off, and you have 5 sites making $1,000 each. Now you have $150,000 in asset value. So once I learned that, I was like, well, I'm going to just stop trying to get my MBA. How would I even get my MBA? Makes way more sense. So that's what we did. We just did that playbook over and over and over again. Every single niche you could think of, whether it was fishing, hunting, diesel trucks, barbecues, you name it, we've pretty much done it. And that's how I got into SEO, was just doing it over and over and over again for our own sites. And then once we had enough money, we would start buying them, or we would just mail hundreds and thousands of people at once and be like, hey, have you ever considered selling your website? We'll give you $3,000 for it. And they haven't touched it in years. And I'm like, sure, have it. And then we would just strap on all this content, build it, and flip them.
How much maintenance because you're going to be owning a lot of websites at the end of this. How much maintenance does it take to keep one of these sites running, make it up to date, have people still actively coming to it?
We don't own any sites right now like that anymore. But back in the day, it was pretty low maintenance because it was so easy SEO was so much easier. So I started a website in college. It was about RVs and travel trailers. And we published, I think, 100 blogs on it. It took us maybe 3 months to do 100 blogs, and you just let it sit for 6 months, 9 months to let it build up to its full potential. And then once it's at its full potential, maybe do a little bit of maintenance on it, a couple hours a month max, I would say. And then you let the P&L average out for 6 to 12 months to get a pretty healthy profit level. Average that out and then sell it. We sold that site for $85,000. Started from scratch, made money month over month, and then you flip it for a kind of bulk.
How long did it take you to sell it? How long did you hold on to it, keep working on it?
I think that one was like 2 year from buy the domain, set it up to sell.
And so you said you owned 40 blogs. So how many different websites did that accompany 40. Over? 40 websites.
So and then each one was a different one.
It's very cool. Looking back at the blog building phase, what were some of the biggest lessons you took away from it?
Definitely go for quality over quantity. Even nowadays, that's something like we really are strong about, even with my new partners in growing Trio, is that if you rush the process, you'll always regret it. Just you'll look back and realize whether it was quality of your own processes, whether it was of your systems, maybe you marketed too early. Anytime you rush through something, it's usually a bad outcome.
That makes sense. What mistakes did you make early that shaped how you approach SEO now? What tools did you use that you maybe regretted, you wish you found something earlier?
I don't regret it, but a funny story is that looking back, I probably would have done more due diligence. But one of the first sites that we bought was in the adult category. I'll just say that. And we didn't do very much due diligence on it. We were just like, this looks great, let's buy it, it's super cheap. And then we completely rebranded it and we added the same playbook, wrote articles, direct commissions. It was making a ton of money. At that time, I think it was making $4,000 a month. I was in class checking the commissions and just being like, wow, I'm rich. I'm not even in class. And because of the spammy niche that we were in, it was very short-lived. So it lasted 30 days and we had this massive growth. And then, or maybe 60 days, but then it just like really tanked. And it went from like $4,000 a month to like $1,000 a month. And that's where it flatlined forever. So just being able to don't rush the process, do your homework, do a full suite of research, that would definitely
Would you do that with
go a long way.
spammy?
We didn't do anything personally. The previous owner did. They were doing a bunch of black hat stuff, like bad, shady backlinks and just trying to cheat the system. And we didn't know that at the time. We were just so inexperienced. And so when we picked up the site, we didn't know that it had this tainted history attached to it. And so that just kind of completely distorted things. But there's other things too. I'd say if you just push out too much quality too fast and don't spot check it or don't quality check it, it's really easy to get tied up on wanting to publish everything and wanting to see results come to life. But if you put out crap, you should expect to get crap results. It's kind of how I've always looked at it. So you have to do it once to know why not to do it again. It's just part of the process.
Definitely. So, like, what kind of tools have you used? Because you're saying everything's human written. Is it human thought too? I've seen a lot of SEO keyword not generators, but like, they look at what people search most on Google and they try to give you that for your topic. Do you use tools like that?
We use Ahrefs a lot, which is one of the top tools for keyword research. That's mainly just for figuring out strategy and figuring out what keywords to go after. What are the secondary keywords? How are we structuring the outline? What are the headings? What are all of the FAQs, all of the meat and potatoes of the outline and structure of the page itself. I use Grammarly a lot. I have a whole arsenal of Google Chrome extensions I use daily. Some software. I use ChatGPT a lot. I have custom GPTs built that are trained to blend between Alex Hormozy trained with TrioSEO. So it's like a mixture between I can ask it anything and it has 10 SOPs from our company built in so that it's trained on all the inner workings of our SOPs and company. I just found this really cool. What was that?
When did you start that? Building your custom AI.
I think I did a couple weeks ago. I'm in a massive sales overhaul right now. So and I'm a huge Hormozy fan. So I just pretty much trained this bot to act like him. And then over time, as I would build more SOPs for the company, I would upload it to the back end, to the brain, so that over time I can ask it anything and it knows everything about our company to start with.
I was actually going to ask about, can you actually remind me what SOP is?
Standard operating procedure. So it's like a set of directions. So if you're like training someone or any document, official document of a company. So our pricing information, our positioning, our messaging, you're saying red flags and green flags to look at for clients. I have like 10 documents for the sales team around every single piece to their process, and then those are like official internal documents, essentially.
That's actually something I've been really wanting to get into. I've used models like Notebook LM where you can load documents in, and now with ChatGPT where you can attach links. You can create a full creative strategy for your business to exactly how you want it to act, and it'll do an amazing job at that.
Do you have curious. You just need premium GPT. I think it's like $20 a month. But
it's weird. I don't even have premium, and it lets me use it.
Well, you can upload documents, but you can't. I don't know if you might be able to do it without, but creating a custom GPT. So every time you go back to that GPT, it's the same model and it learns faster over time.
I'm able to create different models throughout the page. I have the little sidebar, but
that's all you can do. So that's great. So as long as you can over time create more materials and then just go upload it to the back end, it'll just learn over time. It gets smarter. So that's great.
Do you find any value in adding, because you do website work, do you add AI to other companies that you're like being hired for?
No, we kind of let them do their own thing. Most of the companies that we work with they have such strict brand guidelines that they'll give us a bunch of stuff and then we have to play within the box of their rules and making sure that we don't add anything to their site that's not specific to our strategy at the end of the day.
All right, let's get into the future of what you're planning. Someone who's been doing this for years, what trends or changes in SEO are you watching closely right now?
The big one is just how AI search is going to evolve. I think that so many people are thinking that AI is going to be the killer of SEO, but I don't think it's the case. I think that it'll just change, and I think that similar to how businesses in the year 2000 discovered this thing called Google, and they didn't know what Google was, and they didn't know how valuable it was, and then they started realizing that they could appear and have people find their websites. I think that same trend is going to follow with ChatGPT and Perplexity and Bard and all these things where companies are already being discovered in AI, and then they're coming to people like us and saying, how do I appear in ChatGPT? How do I show up within a search result for AI? And so I think if you're going into SEO or thinking about it, you're pretty well equipped to start selling pickaxes during a gold rush, because businesses are going to realize that their competitors are showing up in AI, and they're going to come to SEOs to figure that out.
Definitely. I saw something on your website that I don't know very much about, and I was very curious. Is something like robot.txt something that's very crucial to have in your website? Can AI access it without that?
Yeah, so robots.txt file, it's a script that pretty much just tells Google crawlers what to crawl or what not to crawl. So really big websites, it's much more crucial from that standpoint. But AI, it doesn't really, you can allow or disallow ChatGPT from crawling your site. That's kind of how it's used nowadays, but it doesn't help your AI search. So there's a whole other, I'm not going to bore you to tears with all of the nitty gritty of the technicals, but
I'm so interested.
So there's this thing called the crawl budget, which means that over time, Google will crawl your website a certain number of times per day or per month or whatever the allocated budget is for that. And it crawls every single page. So if your website is enterprise level website and you have 10,000 pages, the thought process of the theory there is that you want the budget to be allocated as efficiently as possible. So you don't want it crawling pages that don't really impact the business. And so what you can do is tell it to disallow the crawlers from Google to not crawl certain pages and to crawl certain pages instead, so that every time it crawls it, it's actually refreshing and being updated on the most valuable content instead of it wasting time on content that doesn't actually matter. So you can optimize it for certain things and say, disallow to anything that has ampersand tags or to old dates beyond 1994 or whatever like that is. So you can get kind of technical in that front, and that's what robots.txt file is pretty much in a nutshell.
Okay, that's very interesting. So it's not very critical for small businesses, you'd say, because they have a lot of big website to crawl through.
Pretty much, I would say it's like one of those things. If you're a small business, it's good to have a robots.txt file, but it's not like a make it or break it part of your strategy.
All right. We keep getting into AI. I just feel like it's so revolutionary right now. We're mentioning that we can create our own custom GPTs, have it be actually pretty accurate on what we want and very helpful. Do you think SEO is going to get to a point where it does appreciate this useful AI content more than human written and then scrap like junk AI content?
Hopefully. We're already there a little bit. I think the problem is that Google doesn't really understand AI versus human content at the end of the day. They can say that they are looking for it and they're trying to upgrade. Their goal is to serve quality content. So if AI content, for argumentative sake, is high quality, you will not be penalized. If AI content is very poor quality, you will be penalized. So it's less about human versus AI and more about the actual outcome of the content. I know some sites that post AI content only and they crush it, but they also have a huge editing process and a huge quality assurance process, and the time it takes to create that content is probably lower lift mentally, but it still is a very hourly labor intensive process. So at the end of the day, it just matters more of how does the user engage with it and does the user actually get value out of it, and that's how it should be rewarded, I think, ultimately.
It's all about streamlining the process for the user and whatever gets you there.
It's just like, how do you, I guess if you were to answer, put yourself in the user's point of view. So if I'm thinking about, I always refer back to cooking websites and recipe articles. If you're looking up an article on how to bake a cake, and if you look up that on Google and you have to go to this recipe site, they're usually littered with ads, and it's like a 5,000 word article and you have to learn to scroll through. I loved making cakes with my grandma when I was 10 years old, and historical pastime just gave me the recipe. I don't care about anything else. And making that experience as easy as possible for the user would be just to put the recipe at the top of the article. That's what they came there for. Give them exactly what they asked for and move on. But the websites have an incentive to make money based on ad revenue and time on page and all that sort of stuff. And so that's kind of where AI will start crushing those websites, because they can show the recipe in a millisecond and the user is done. But a more technical topic like how to learn robots text files, that's not an AI overview article. Like, you probably wanted to read a multi-thousand word article about it, then go to a YouTube video and practice. So it just depends on the type of content and what the goal is at the end of the day.
So I have a side question, just because I've always wondered this. Why do articles like how to bake a cake like that, with so many ads between every single paragraph, rank at the top for Google? Why, when it has such a bad user interface, how is it at the top?
So most of those sites are just, they dominate because they're massive authoritative websites. So each website, I'm familiar with domain rating or domain authority. So the domain rating or the scorecard of that website is so high that any content they publish, as long as it's semi-high quality, will still rank, even though the on-page experience isn't necessarily the best, because it's still optimized. The article still has headings and keywords, and it still has that. But if you were to post that same article with just 6 steps for the recipe, it's kind of this weird double-edged sword where you need the other stuff to rank and succeed, but they get the ultimate say on how the page is displayed and what the user gets at the end of the day. So that's why it's a toss-up between serving content for the user or serving content for your P&L.
And then you mentioned ChatGPT. Nowadays, if you want to know how to bake a cake, you look it up. ChatGPT will give you the recipe instantly. Where does it get that information from, and does it technically give you traffic from your website? I know I've been doing some website. On the website I'm running, I see when ChatGPT comes to my page, looks at something certain, and then leaves. So is that a strategy?
As a strategy, if the user clicks from ChatGPT to your website. So I would say that it's more dependent on what is the search intent, because intent is everything. So for the bake a cake thing, that's not very conversion focused. So if your website is around selling cooking classes, how to bake a cake is tied and related to it, but somebody who's in the mindset of baking a cake is trying to bake a cake. They're not trying to sign up for cooking classes. So it just really depends on what is the user searching to begin with, and how does that relate to them actually going from ChatGPT to your site to learn more about your potential service or offer.
So it's more about the conversion and not the traffic.
It just depends on, is the goal solved by that checkpoint? Do they get what they need then, or should they explore further to get the full story?
You mentioned that the ChatGPT model is something that you're currently working on to try to improve and like kind of home in, customize it. Is there anything else you're still trying to improve on?
Here, I'm currently working on a strategy for building calculators for client sites. The calculators are calculators. So it's like a really interesting SEO strategy where if you can create a digital asset, whether in the form of a calculator or a quiz or some sort of engagement tool for a website, it's a really good lead magnet for businesses. Because if somebody searches for SEO ROI calculator, they're in the mindset of trying to figure out, does SEO generate ROI for my business? And then the natural next step would be trying to find somebody for services. And so if I build a calculator around SEO ROI with a full dashboard of inputs and numbers they can change around, and at the bottom of the calculator it says, get this email report, download, or let us email this report to you. So when they email that report to themselves, we get that email as a lead. So over time, if we can build these tools for people's websites, then it produces more leads and more business for them. And there's a really cool website I found called lovable.dev. And it's ChatGPT, but for a development standpoint. So you can talk to it, talking to ChatGPT, and it will code all of the front end and back end of anything, whether it's a page or a tool or calculator or quiz, and it will 100% do all the code and the technical components. and then you just copy and paste the code in your website.
That sounds very interesting. I'm trying to think about how I can implement that into a real estate standpoint, because there's so many things you need to calculate in real estate.
Well, that's like where the keyword research starts. You have to go to Ahrefs, find the primary keyword. So maybe it's like super competitive term, but something like mortgage loan calculator. Now that's probably has a ton of competition, but that's a tool that you can create based on total net worth, asset value, how much debt to income ratio you have, and then get that as an output. And then if that was on a real estate website, that real estate broker would then have that lead from whoever used that calculator. So it starts with the keyword research, figuring out what the intent and what the demand is, and then creating a tool based on that example. Or like even if there's a cost, how much does a real estate broker make off of a home sale? That could potentially be somebody who's buying a house and wanting to see what the fees are, and that could be a calculator based on what state they're in or how big the house costs or whatever that might look like, and that could be an article with the tool and then the lead gen from there. So
this is definitely something I'm going to start thinking about and trying to do. Thank you.
Of course.
You're saying you're getting these emails from them that my generation, we don't really check emails, junk mails. Do you think that they're rising or falling in use in like what you can get out of an email? A cold call and an email.
Cold calls are a lot harder. Cold emails, I think, are even worse. But I think businesses still rely on email at the end of the day, whether it's like support. I think we're still probably 10, 20 years out from email really making negative impact. Like we're moving away from email. It's just also, I think, maybe just time of your life where you're in. Your generation may not be using emails, but it's also because you may not have a purpose for email. If 80% of your ideal customers use email, you probably use email. If 80% of your customers used Snapchat, you probably use Snapchat. So it just really depends on where your customers are living and what they're using and developing a strategy based on that. The same tool, you could say, instead of email, it could be give us your Instagram profile and we'll do a full audit analysis on your profile social media feed. And now that you have their Instagram handle, go DM them. You can always figure out a way to get in touch with your ideal customer based on what they're using and how they're communicating.
Definitely. So cold calling on emails, though, is probably one of the harder things to do.
I block 20 emails a day just so that it's just bad. Some people say they still work, but it's just so clear. I hate cold emails, the bane of my existence.
But I don't disagree that emails are bad. I love getting my receipts through emails, love getting some news articles through that. So for someone who's new to SEO and just starting out, what's the one thing they should focus on early besides quality of the article?
Learning the fundamentals for sure. What is internal linking? What's good site structure? How to do a navigation? How to set up your footer? Image alt text, site speed, image site speed specifically, heading to alt tags, all that 101 stuff. And then I would say pick a type of SEO and only go in that direction. So if you're doing real estate, you probably want to focus on local SEO, not like what we do, which is more content and national SEO. And local SEO, if you just hammer down on local SEO only, you will absolutely crush an agency. I have no doubt that if you started now, and local SEO is so easy compared to other stuff, and it's just like you'd easily making $10K a month by the time you graduate if you did it. I have no doubt. It's where SEO is growing because local businesses need it more than ever.
I actually haven't really heard about all these different types of SEO. What I thought you could just try to get, it makes sense that you target a niche, but I just thought it was over everything. You want all angles that your business is to have those kind of SEOs. Are you just saying to localize all those ends of what your business can do?
Well, like local SEO specifically is a whole different can of worms. So if we get a lead for local SEO, we just refer that out to a local SEO partner and we don't even touch it. We don't work on it. We don't take them all as a client. We specialize in a different form. So we let someone who specializes in local do that. And the difference being is that local SEO, are you familiar with like a Google business profile? Or if you like Google anything, it's restaurants near me, and you see like that side panel of a business, and it has reviews and phone number and all that sort of stuff. Every business has one of those, but businesses rarely know how to optimize them. And like, however that's optimized is what drives your local search. So making sure that you have the right categories for the type of business it is, There's a thing called NAP, which is an acronym for name, address, and phone number. And that should match on your website. It should match on your Google business profile. It should match in all of the directories around your location. So if you're doing local business for real estate, they should be in Yellow Pages, Chamber of Commerce pages, all of the local area pages that say this is a legit business in this city. And then as you build city local connections on their websites, getting backlinks from local businesses will help more than getting a backlink from a national non-local business. So what you're trying to do is essentially, if you picture and envision an iceberg, the little piece of the iceberg that you see above the water is like your website and Google business profile, but all of the depth below the iceberg that you don't see below the water is essentially all the work you do in the local area that tells Google that you're a legit business. So reviews, backlinks, content exchanges, citations, directories, all that sort of stuff. And over time, that helps Google understand that you do business in that area, and there's a reason to show you when someone searches for XYZ type of business near me.
That's awesome. Going into content exchanges, I know about blog posts and trying to get other people involved. What's the best way to reach out to people, get your business to exchange with them? Because sometimes it feels like they wouldn't want to do business with you.
It's definitely harder than ever. I would say to come to them with ideas and ideas that would actually produce value. So if you're doing SEO and you have a keyword research tool like Ahrefs, say it's like a local business in Bellingham. You should say, hey, I'm working on XYZ's website and I'm wondering if we can post an article on your website as a co-author. Here are some ideas I have that have actual demand from local people and that would help drive business to them. So looking at it from the framework of what does this person get out of it at the end of the day? Because you have something in mind that you want out of it, which is the link. But why should they say yes? So how does this help them produce more business? How do they get more customers out of this? So if they're like a bakery, say it's like for Pure Bliss in downtown Bellingham, you're like, hey, can I post an article on your site around the top 10 best bakeries or sweet spots in Bellingham and feature you in your blog so that as people find this blog, they'll find your business and want to come to your spot. And then I can co-author it and say that I was written by, Sean as an affiliate of XYZ or whatever. If you just come to them and say, hey, can I post on your blog? They don't care. They don't know what that means. You really have to paint the picture of what do they get out of it and how does it help them? Because people are selfish. So you have to put it in that perspective.
And going to these people, if I'm doing something like real estate and I'm going and helping a bakery, even though it's not related, but it's in Whatcom, in local, would that help drive local SEO?
No, you definitely want the relevance there, just using the bakery as an example. But if it's a real estate thing, what is the closest thing related to real estate? So it'd be like loan brokers, loan officers. Those are harder because they're usually more national focused. You're not going to get a link from Wells Fargo, or you can't post on something like that. So that would be one of them. I would think about how does that work, or what businesses are semi-relevant to that. The other thing you could say is other real estate people in your area that are allies instead of competitors. So maybe somebody who is in commercial real estate but not homeowner or single family home real estate, or maybe they work on acquisitions of big businesses and flipping commercial or something like that, or land real estate or developers or something like that. I'm trying to go that route, but at the end of the day, relevance is huge, but local will still matter more. So if you can't go that, what's one step out, which would be the city of Bellingham or official blogs and news publications in the city, news articles, stuff like that, and slowly branch outward and go that route.
So you don't think having a blog on the best 10 places to eat in Bellingham would affect the Bellingham real estate broker? Because in my head, it's kind of like if you know the Bellingham area, well, as a real estate broker, if you know the Bellingham area, you're a better fit for someone trying to find a house there, but Google wouldn't see that the same, would they?
Do you mean to have that article of the places to eat on the real estate owner's website?
No, on these bakeries' websites, but have you be a co-author.
It just wouldn't make sense because if you were representing, it would definitely help that business and you get a backlink to it. But at the end of the day, how does Google make the association that you are an expert to write on that topic or the value of it? So if you were on Aslan's blog, for example. Why would Aslan be referencing a real estate broker? Wouldn't that seem random from that sense? So it would make a much more, association would be much stronger if Aslan linked to Schweinhaus as the best places to grab a beer after 5 o'clock on a Friday. But if you're talking about real estate on Aslan's site, there's a disconnect between the people who are on Aslan's site to get food and beverage and then looking at real estate. They're two different customer groups at the end of the day. So there has to be some association between the relevance of that, and that will actually help the SEO at the end of the day.
The intent of people going to this site to look at the best places to eat would never lead to real estate.
Exactly.
Do you also do social media postings for these companies or for your clients?
No, not for our clients. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn myself, but that's just because I've built that up over the last couple of years. But we don't do, SEO is completely different from social media. I would separate those as a suggestion if you're thinking about dipping in one or the other.
That definitely helps because I've been kind of trying to do a combo and they kind of seem like they're splitting farther apart the more I get into them.
Don't do it. It's just like, and people with social media, it's such a messy can of worms because people want a social media manager, but they also want a designer and they want a copywriter and they want somebody who can do this entire strategy. But SEO is completely different mindsets and strategies and everything. Just kind of stick to one or else you're going to stretch yourself thin.
If you weren't biased and you had to pick one, would you pick social media or SEO as a better route to go down?
I would probably go with SEO still because SEO or social media is just so saturated. And in order to really make some money, and it depends on what your goals are. If you are fine with a few clients, it's so much more difficult, in my opinion, to sell a $2,500 a month social media package without doing Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube. You have to stack on 5 different platforms to make it feel like they're getting a lot of value out of that. And then if you're doing 4 to 8 posts a month on 5 accounts or whatever that is, you're having 30 pieces of content a month. For reference, you can work with SEO and our packages are about $3,000 a month and we do 5 articles and 5 backlinks, which is fewer deliverables but higher upside long-term for them. And local SEO is even much easier because you just have to manage the profile. You treat the Google business profile almost like a social media account. So if you do like that side of things, that could be a potential way for you to blend both worlds because you should still treat a Google business profile like a social media in that you're uploading photos, you're providing updates, but it's all through the Google business profile itself. And I know people that charge anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a month for local SEO, and they work maybe 10 hours a month on it. It's so hands off once you get the strategy in place, and people will react better to getting more phone calls on Google or getting more reviews. Those things are very easy to track and very easy to see the results of, but social media, you get a bunch of impressions on a post, that's cool, but that doesn't equal more business, they're going to leave you. So how do you optimize between high retainer or high monthly charging with a efficient delivery, making your life easy so you can scale, and then also looking at it from a value add to them so they can stay long term? Because the value ratio of a client is number of times you can close in a month multiplied by the time they're with you, LTV, lifetime value of the customer, and then that just equals your lifetime enterprise value. How valuable is your company at the end of the year based on how quickly you can close and how long you can retain them as a client. So that's how I look at it.
So the longer you can keep that retention rate up, the better you'll do.
You don't want to have to resell someone every 3 months, but SEO is such a long game. Our average clients stay with us for 6 to 9 months. Some of them are even a year long. So that's kind of where you want to be able to hold on to someone and look back and know that over a lifetime of a year long of them being with you, if you're charging them $3,000 a month, it's $36,000 a year per client. So it's just hard to equal that with social media, I would say, unless you're really good and you charge that much for social. But I don't think people pay that much for social.
Do the clients leave you after a year or so? Is there more work to be done on the SEO, or do you have to tap out at one point?
No, there's always work to be done. You can always update content. You can always build more backlinks. You can always build more authority. We often see people leave because marketing budgets are always the first to go. If there's budget constraints, the marketing, SEO, social media, PPC, all those just get slashed right away. Other industries are just much harder. And so some clients have explosive growth, others don't. And the people who don't have explosive growth might feel like their money could be spent better on ads, or we had a person leave recently or lower their package because they wanted to go start networking on conferences. And so people are always going to want to experiment with their marketing budget, and just based on how they see growth is where they want to go start pulling different levers in their business.
Do you ever see these people come back once they leave?
Here and there, we'll have people, or we'll hit them up and see if they want to come back on for a special offer. But I think that it's definitely a harder play. Once they've made their mind, it's harder to get them to come back and try and go round two.
I just want to check in on time. I know it's been over an hour already. Are you good? Or
Yeah, I have up until 11:30. I got 30 more minutes if you want to go over.
Sweet. I just have a couple more questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Backlinks are crucial, and I don't feel like I fully understand them. Can you give me a little explainer of how to get into them? You write blogs, you have other people posting these blogs as you, the co-author, and then you just link your website?
So essentially, or you can also go into a pre-existing blog that somebody already has on their website and see if they'll update it and add a paragraph. Expert quotes are really good for that. So like if you were in the real estate area in Bellingham and you saw that there was a small locally owned loan officer and they have a blog around home loans and mortgage rates for 2025, you could ask them to go and provide an expert quote from a real estate broker around what they're seeing locally in the industry, and it'd be like a 2 to 3 sentence quote from that real estate broker, and then it would say from their name, comma, website brand, and then the brand name of their website would be linking to their homepage.
Okay. Would it be useful to then, in return, write your own blog on your website talking about I forgot how you...
Talking back to them.
Writing a blog article about them and then a couple other ones in the local area.
No, you want to minimize the number of, they're called reciprocal links. So if I link to you and you link to me, that's bad. Because it's bad at scale. If you have a few of them, it's fine. But if 100% of your links look like that, Google will catch on because they're not naturally gained. You're going to them with the incentive to try and gain a link, and they're going to you with the incentive of trying to gain a link. So according to Google's rules, that's against their policy of trying to cheat the system for building backlinks. And so it's fine if you have 100 links like that, and I'd say no more than 15, 20% max. But it should always try and be one way so that it looks more organic. If you think about it like this, if you want more people talking about you than you talking about everyone else. That gives you credibility in the space because everyone around you is talking about you, and that's what helps Google build authority.
It's kind of, you gain a point when they write about you, and then you just lose it instantly if you give it right back.
Not lose a point, but the more people, I guess look at it as like you were at a party and some super popular person walked in, everyone knows that person. So like they have clout or whatever that is, and that's how you want your website to be in the Google space. Anytime your website appears for a search, Google should be able to show your website because you have that authority and that credibility based on your industry and expertise that you bring to the table.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. What do you say is the best way to stay up to date on the newest SEO trends and changes now that it's at such a rapid pace?
Yeah, there's a lot of great people on LinkedIn. I'd say that if you're not building a personal brand on LinkedIn, it's so valuable nowadays. Not only from a job perspective, but a personal branding perspective. Posting content regularly. If you do, I think that there's a lot of power in learning something like local SEO or SEO in general, and using LinkedIn as your diary to learn that and to share it with other people who are in that space and can provide critical feedback to you and help you learn faster. So for example, if you're learning local SEO for real estate people, go and follow and network with all of the top SEOs and especially local SEOs in that space and just hit them up and say, hey, I'm in college, I'm learning this space, I'm really passionate around going into this. Do you have 2 to 3 seconds to reply to my DM asking what is the best thing you can learn, and then round all that content up into a carousel or post it, tag them, and over time you'll become more aware with like strategies and meeting people and all that sort of stuff. And I've been building my LinkedIn profile for 2.5 years, and I've just gotten so many opportunities through it. I get business deals, I get brand deals, I get partnerships. Once you have that credibility in the space, people know you, they refer business to you. It's a no-brainer, I think, nowadays to focus on that.
If you could go back and give yourself advice when you first got started, what would you tell yourself? It's like that question.
Yeah, that's a good one. I would definitely buy a lot more crypto. I know it's not SEO related, but I would have bought crypto in 2018. And SEO wise, I probably would have built more brands than more micro niche sites. So back then it was just so much about quantity, and going back to my thing about quantity versus quality, I think that if you're going to do SEO right, looking back then, I think a lot of the sites that we had that got burned would have been around a lot longer had we focused on brand building, authority, and backlinks, and credibility, and trust, and all these things that we now know to be true about good SEO. But back then, it was just such a cash cow numbers game that it was like pull lever as fast as possible to create cash. It just was the right place, right time, but also looking back in hindsight, probably could have done just as much business with half the number of sites and made those sites twice as big each. So that's kind of how I look at it.
What were you doing that wasn't branding? Because you're talking about having all these different articles, blogs on this one website about the topic. That sounds like you're branding it, but what would you describe as being different?
Well, those sites were so single intent focused. And what I mean by that is if somebody is looking for the best snowboarding jackets of 2025, their goal is to buy a jacket. Their goal isn't to go look at other articles on that website. Their goal is to search for that keyword, find an article that recommends the number one jacket, and then go and buy that jacket and leave and never come back because they have the job is done. I think that where looking back on it, building a brand comes down to building people into that ecosystem and getting them into a newsletter, because if somebody's looking for a snowboard jacket, they're probably interested in new bindings, a snowboard, gloves, hats, socks, boots, whatever that wax, whatever it is that they currently use on a day-to-day basis. And so how do you put them into a 2-week drip email sequence that sends them tips and tricks about local mountains or guides on how to wax your snowboard with a direct link to buy more wax? How do you give them more value beyond the initial step of where they ended and left? And then that builds them into the ecosystem, builds them into the brand, and gets them remembering who you are so they come back time and time again. Because all of the customers that we had through each of those sites were one-time customers. It was search by lead over and over and over again. And so building a brand is building a repeat customer. Building Nike, people buy Nikes because they're Nike. So how do you build a brand that people come to associate with and they remember you and they go to you because you're that person, rather than being the first result on Google?
I'm trying to think of an example of a trustworthy blog that has that big brand name that doesn't actually sell anything directly themselves.
There's a lot of homesteading websites, a lot of tech review sites. If you just TechCrunch, have you ever heard of that website?
Maybe.
I mean, you just type as headphones. Our ratings, like rtings.com, that's a massive website. This site crushes. rtings.com. Their entire website is just based on reviewing websites or reviewing products. And these are all affiliate products. They don't actually sell these products. They just review them. And this is just strictly a website. They don't sell. It's not a legit business. Don't get me wrong. They probably make millions a month. But it's not a physical product website at the end of the day.
So reviewing products is where it's at right now. Reviewing products in a whole ecosystem. And having, I don't know the right word, not authority, but
for them, that's what they do. But they do it right. They hand buy and hand test and review and really put those things to the test. So the cost of those articles are probably a couple $1,000s per article to create because they have to buy all the headphones and do all that sort of stuff. But the people who go to that article understand that that's a true test. It's not like you just read a couple of reviews on Amazon and look at the pros and cons and wrote the article. they put in 100 hours of testing to actually determine what is the best. And so the trust that goes into that piece of content is what brings people back over and over again, because they know that that person or that company is producing very high quality content and it's stuff they can trust. So that's where their money is going to be spent wisely.
I also feel like that's kind of where the social media aspect meets that, when they're doing those tests and they're like, because making a YouTube video is the most obvious answer to that. If you're testing out a product, link that into your blog as you write to it, because people love watching stuff more than reading.
That company specifically, they can cover all platforms and channel with one piece of content. So they spend probably 40 hours testing those products. They write the blog, they get organic search, they create a YouTube channel, they get that. They rip the YouTube channel video into shorts, they get that. They use the shorts for TikTok, they get Instagram, they get the reel. They have 10 pieces of content from one piece of content. So that's super efficient from that perspective. And if they crush all of those, that one article that cost them $5,000 or $10,000 to make is infinitely scalable in terms of the revenue. And it's crazy. That's how you win.
That's a crazy future to get into. Where can people follow your work and learn more about what you're doing?
LinkedIn's the name of the game. You can look me up on Google, LinkedIn, Steven Schneider, TrioSEO. You can find me one way or another.
All right. Steven, I really appreciate you sharing your time and your insights. It's great to hear how you build TrioSEO with focus and intention. For those listening, you can learn more at TrioSEO.com, and be sure to check out the link in the description for a special 50% off offer that Steven is generously sharing. Thank you again for tuning into the Lightbody Brief. If you found this helpful, I'd love if you shared the episode or left a quick review. Until next time, I'm Sean Lightbody, and thank you for listening. All right. Thank you for doing that with me. I really appreciate all that advice. It's actually very helpful into what I'm doing.
I will